Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how you can edit data through an API using Jquery AJAX with a client-server architecture. If you're looking at this video for the first time, let me tell you that we had developed this API section for all the actions, that is the insert, update, delete, uh, put, patch, and yeah, select. So all of that has been explained in one of the old videos. If you look at our playlist of API using ADO.NET, you would find all this. We had also created a demo model of the client, which is retrieving the data like using HTML controls. And if you see the videos in this list, you should see all the setup for this client as well. However, I'm still going to give you a brief idea of what all things we did here. So when you are setting up this API, you are going through a new application, and this is going to be this will be a web API application. So create new project and ASP.NET Core Web API. Okay, so this is what we are using for the API generation, and ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller is what we're using for the client app. Now, with this one, after you select the project, you generate that. We did not select an HTTPS. This is the normal one, and we selected the version as .NET 6. We set up the app settings with the connection string. We went to the list of NuGets that we have installed. So these are the list of NuGets that we need. This design is not required because that's mostly used in case of scaffolding, but in our web API, we don't need a scaffolding, so you may not use this one. The remaining things we require. The program.cs setup has been done like this, wherein we have put some, most of the things were default, but we added a couple of things. So this one, the builder.services.add controllers with views.add Newtonsoft JSON. This is for the JSON data that we are using to serialize and deserialize. App.course is required to make communication using Jquery AJAX. This is to be kept in both sides, on the server and on the client. So on the MVC also you will use this course. Rest all remains by default, nothing from our side. So they were all by default. Now moving ahead, we created a student class which only has a couple of fields that if you are looking at my table, it would show you the design, the data that we have in my table. The ID is an auto-generated column, the student name is a required column, and the age is a number, and address is a string, as you see in the model class. Now using that one, we created a controller which is an API controller, and you must look at these two headers that should make you sure that it is an API controller and it's inheriting from the controller class, not the controller base class. All these actions, the get, post, these are all explained previously. However, I'm still going to put that in the description, my GitHub link, so you should all get these links. Now let's go ahead, and without wasting more time, the client side is doing nothing much. It has only one controller, and it's only generating views from them. Okay, index is to get all the data, create is for adding, and edit is for editing. Now from the index we listed all the data, and create is for add, and edit is for passing the data and editing it. Okay, now a little more explanation about the actions that we are going to perform. Okay, edit records through web API using Jquery AJAX. Step 1. So we created an API and a client. On the API, we will have an action that is going to give us by ID, rows by ID, and we are going to call that action from the client using Jquery AJAX and find the record. Now, after getting that ID, we should have another action method which is going to do the edits. That will accept all the columns on the parameter, and we are going to fetch that from the client side using Jquery AJAX. So calling the API URL using post or put and request from AJAX and run the update query. After making the changes, we ran the update query and we should get the result. Now moving ahead, this is the function which is going to fetch the data by ID from the API. So basically this is passing the parameter with the ID or the serial number, and it's a get request. So this will fetch our data and bind them to the fields. Okay, so the response is bound to the fields, student name, age, and address text fields, and if there is an error, it will throw an error. Okay, now this is the server side, or you can say that the API get action method, which is find by ID, and it's receiving ID as a parameter. It's taking a connection string from the app settings.json using configuration, and it's generating the connection. Then data table is created, and command parameter is passed, string connection string is opened, and data is bound to the data table using adapter.fill, and if there whatever rows is received is returned to the data table with JSON. Okay, now if it's not found, a not found message, and if it is an error with a status code 500 as internal server error. Now another action method, another jQuery function to save the data that we made changes on. First of all, we retrieve the data, then we made the changes, and this is after changing, we send the request to make the update. So this is the client side jQuery function, or the AJAX function, which is calling the put, the put, the put method from the API to pass the parameters with all the column values, and it will give us a response, though we have made changes in the response that to give us a customized validation message. So let's move ahead, and this is the put action method on the web API. We are receiving all the parameters on the uh, action, and we have marked it as HTTP put, and opening the connection, passing the SQL command to update those records, and checking how many values have been received. And if it's an okay or more than zero, then we say the record has been updated. If not, it's a bad request, and if there is an error, then that's a bad request as well. Okay, so without wasting any more time, let's run the application and see the difference. Okay, so as we run the API, these are the things, because it's a Swagger, so we all have these kind of output. Now we should be using the put. First of all, find by ID and then put. So find by ID will receive one parameter, and put will have all the parameters. Okay, so let's go ahead to the client and see. Now the client is here. Oh, sorry, client is here. Okay, let's pull all the student data. Let's do the inspect. While we try to fetch the data, it will give me the list of data that we have. Okay, so now I found all the list of data. Okay, from this, I'm going to do one select. Let's select Lima, Nigeria. We do an edit. So what is this going to do? This will send us to another page. We are not doing the edit on the same page. We are doing it on a different page, because I didn't want to break the structure of this application. The look and feel I did not want to change. So I'm taking all these things to the next page, wherein I will pass the ID of this row on a query string, and will perform the operation. Now you can see that we have passed that value on the query string, where ID equals to 2009 is the sequence number, serial number. Now this is going to fetch our data and bind it to the text box fields. Now that we have our text box filled up, let's make some changes. Now Lima, let's make it Lolita. Age, let's make it 23. Nigeria, let's make it Africa. Let's do the save changes. Button save has hit. Now moving ahead, the save Ajax function is called. That's going to fetch our edit, and it's passing all the parameters to the edit of the API. Once this operation is successful, we will see a record updated. Okay. Now let's go ahead to the student field page again and see our data has been updated or not. 2009, you can see 2009, and it's Lolita 23 Africa. Let's see our database. 2009. It has changed to Lolita 23 Africa. Okay. So basically, that was all I wanted to explain you guys. So what we are doing on the client side is we are receiving from the index page. We simply send the ID with the query string to another page, and we received it on the edit page. Then we caught the value of the ID with a parameter, with a variable, and then we are passing a find by ID so that it can fetch the record and bind it to our text boxes. After binding it to the text boxes, we made changes and we hit the save button. Save button click and calls the save data function, and this is taking it to the edit or the put request of the API and updating the record. Okay. All right, guys. So that was all for this video. I hope you understood what we did here. Uh, that was all for this one. Stay tuned, stay connected until we have our next set of videos. And thanks for watching. Happy coding.